Hi, my name is Jan Wilczek from WolfSound.com. Welcome to WolfTalk, a podcast about audio programming. In this podcast, you will learn how to build your career in programming or research related to audio, meet programmers and researchers from all around the world, and learn about the intricacies of sound. Hi everyone, and welcome to the 14th episode of the WolfTalk podcast. Today I have a very special guest for you. As usual, this is Christoph Guttandin, a web audio developer from Berlin, whom I met at the Audio Developers Conference 2022. So, of course, we'll delve deep into the web audio stuff. We'll, above all, discuss his story and how he became a web audio developer. And what is important to stress here, he's a self-taught audio developer. So I believe you can gain a lot of confidence from hearing to his story. And what is more, he's an independent contractor. So if you're looking that this could be your route, I believe Chris shares some tips that may be helpful on the path to becoming a freelancer. And of course, this wouldn't be a WolfTalk episode if we did not mention a way how you can entry into this field. So I asked Chris specifically, what are the best technologies to get started today? What is the kind of a go-to piece of software that you can use or programming language? And Chris was so nice as to mention a ton of resources that he uses in his day-to-day job of web audio development. If you'd like to check up on these tools, references, and resources, please head out to episode notes at thewolfsound.com/talk014. So once again, it's thewolfsound.com/talk014. And here I'd be remiss if I did not mention that if you want to become an audio plugin developer, please go to thewolfsound.com/checklist, because there's a free resource that lists every bit and piece of knowledge that you need to become an audio developer. So if you're looking for a roadmap to get you there, and I get quite a lot of requests, hey, could you design for me a dedicated roadmap how I can learn to become an audio developer? Here is a kind of a go-to place that you can start right away for free. Once again, it's thewolfsound.com/checklist. And now, Christoph Guttandin. Hi, Chris. Thanks for agreeing on this interview. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jan. Well, I live in Berlin. I build multimedia applications for the web, which are sometimes small things, sometimes big projects. Sometimes I'm working alone. Sometimes I'm part of a bigger project. But it's all different every time. But it always has to do something with audio and video in the browser. And sometimes I hang out at conferences, and this is how we met.
Yeah, exactly. We met during the Audio Developers Conference 2022, and I hope we'll come back to this topic in this interview. Meanwhile, I wanted to ask you how your journey in music started. So where your interest in music first took place?
I don't really remember. But I have a small daughter, and sometimes we visit my parents, and whenever we do that, they let her play with my old toys. And that's why I know that I had a Mickey Mouse drum set when I was a very little kid. And I think that was my first music instrument, and that's when it all started.
Nice. And maybe you remember then your motivation that pushed you to go into university and, study audio-related things?
Yeah, I think that was... because of electronic music, I was, I still very much enjoy listening to techno music, and I was curious how that works and how these sounds get produced and how this all works and how I could do this myself. And so then one thing led to the other.
Okay, so what did you study and where?
The subject was called Medieninformatik. I think there's no good translation to English for it. and it was at the HTW or HTW here in Berlin. And yeah, it was had to do something with media, I thought, but it was more tailored towards image processing, and everything had to be done in Java. And when you diverged from that path, then it was not really for you, and that's what I did. So yeah, it wasn't really for me. I didn't know this in advance, but yeah, in the end, I finished it anyway.
Okay, then good for you for persevering, pushing through. Although I'm surprised that they use Java, because I would naturally think that for image processing they would use MATLAB because it's a academic environment. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, for some reason, like Java was like the language to use, and if you like, that was also my part of my frustration, because I was doing most of the things in JavaScript, and always had to fight that to explain that this is also possible. But
okay, so did you directly after the study go into your independent thing and started doing independent contracting?
Oh yeah, I already actually did this already before. Like I was something like an AV technician. That was my first traineeship. I think that's the right term in English for that. And then after that, I started as an independent developer, and part of the motivation for studying it was like that I thought I needed proper education to do this, but actually no one really asked me if I went to university or not. Like, of course, we are talking now about it, but no one really asked me this before hiring me. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually a very important message, that you don't need to study it at the university to do it for a living. And so, if you didn't have the university to help you, how did you learn web audio programming?
I don't know. I think I was around ever since, and this is basically how I did it. Like, I think the first thing I ever did with the Web Audio API was a project on a music hack day, and I kind of anticipated that question, so I looked it up. It was in 2013, and now about 10 years ago, and at that time there was still two audio APIs in the browser, like the good old audio data API from Mozilla. And I thought, like when I as I said before, I was like an AV technician, and then I became a developer. And at that time, there was not much you could do with this AV knowledge in the browser. But then when the Web Audio API came along, and WebRTC was also very new at that point in time, then you could finally do media things in the browser again. Again, basically, because it was kind of possible before with Flash, but that went away. And then, the standards-based things came along. And I was experimenting with it ever since. And then slowly but steadily, I got jobs working on it, working with it. And that's basically how I learned it, and how I got to know all the little secrets around it.
Nice. And before we delve deeper into this, I wanted to ask, because that's something that I always find interesting. How did your customers find you? How did you land your first gigs, and how did it go on from there?
I don't know what really were my first web audio jobs. I can't really remember. But I never really left the media sector. Mm-hmm. Like when I was a developer, I kept working for media companies, not doing media stuff, but basically doing their websites. And so I never really left that sector. So I think that was a big advantage in hindsight. But I don't really remember what the first web audio job was. But I think nowadays people find me because they find me on the internet. And hopefully this podcast will be helping with that too. But I don't really know, to be honest.
Okay, I hope so too. Okay, so I've seen many times that you contributed to the web audio community through your open source code, but also work in the audio community group, and also your talks at various conferences, which are numerous, and that's quite impressive. And then I would like to ask you about your work and experience in this area. So maybe one thing would be, how did you become a member of this audio community group?
By filling out a form. Like anyone can be a member. That's something that I actually had no clue before, that this is possible with things like standards on the web, that you can just contribute. Like many of these standards, or I think all of them, are nowadays basically GitHub repositories, and you can just file an issue. You can even submit a PR. Will probably not get accepted right away, but there's always a lengthy discussion if you propose something, but it's actually possible, and you can definitely take part in it. And yeah, at the very beginning, I thought that's definitely not for me, because I don't work at Google and I'm not building a browser myself, but you can definitely join. And especially the audio working group, which is like, there's the community group, which everyone can join, and then there's the working group, which is only consisting of paying members of the W3C. But especially the audio working group is very, very open to that. They encourage anyone to join.
Okay, and
so if anyone listening to this has any problems with the Web Audio API, feel free to propose something.
Nice. And is it structured? So do you have like concrete responsibilities there as a member of this of the working group?
No. I'm not a member of the working group.
Okay.
Like, I'm only in the community group, and there's no responsibility attached to that.
Okay, so then it's mostly based on your voluntary feedback, and also submitting the proposals in the form of pull requests. Okay, yeah. That's the fact that I get working group and community group confused, and which you are in like it shows how far I am from this territory. But hopefully this podcast will also get me a little bit closer. So
yeah, it's actually very confusing. Yeah.
But
there are so many rules, and in fact, no one. Well, obviously, everyone cares about it, but if you do something wrong or propose something which you are not allowed to propose, no one will judge you on that.
That's actually pretty great. And the last point in this topic, I would like to ask you, because you really contributed a lot through your talks at conferences. And could you maybe share how's your approach to it? Do you have any tips to speak to people who would like to speak at developer conferences?
I'm not sure if I'm experienced enough to give tips for that, but I generally just try it. Like, there's always this call for proposals, as you also know, and then you have to propose something, and either it gets picked or not, and then we have to actually prepare the talk. But it's frustrating at times. Like, if you put work into proposing something, and then you have the feeling that it wasn't really read at all. But it's a bit like gambling. So you don't, if your talk gets rejected, don't feel like that's not for you. Like, you have to try it numerous times until it finally works.
Yeah, okay.
And then sometimes you submit something which you think, I'm not sure if that's ever going to be accepted, and then that's actually the one which gets accepted. So
yeah, that's actually in hindsight, it's very interesting which talks get accepted and which don't.
Yeah, and I also think, like, I don't have any data for this, but being at a few conferences, I think that from the outside, it always looks like there are experienced speakers which get accepted at every conference. And the truth is, they just sent in a lot of proposals, and that's how they end up at all these conferences. So there's no real secret to it.
Okay, so it's mastery through repetition. then
I would say so. Well, is that also your experience?
No, I got lucky. I think I would say I'm 2 out of 2 so far. But yeah, I mean, in both cases, I think I had good topics, so to say. And when I spoke at the scientific conference, it's also, I haven't just presented my research, but I was also backed by professors and people generally more experienced in this field than I was. So that was like, I think 80% of the success, and not in the sense that they are so known that the paper gets automatically accepted, but they were able to, give me feedback beforehand, right? They knew what is good, what is maybe not good, so what's worth presenting and what's not worth presenting. And the feedback I got from them, is if it's not worth submitting, then we won't submit it, so we won't sign it. But if it's worth submitting, we typically get it through. And that was the case. And for ADC 2022, I thought I had a strong case, but as you said, it's not always a guarantee for being accepted.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good point. Like, I didn't really think about it, but there's actually the differentiation between an academic conference and then things like the ADC, where you, like, when you submit a paper, then you actually have 5, 6, 7 pages which prove that you are an expert and that you really put work into this. But when you submit a talk, then you have a short paragraph, and then people have to decide based on that if you are if that is something worth putting on stage or not. And that's actually like, you get judged on something which has nothing to do with the final talk in the end. So.
Yeah, exactly. And when people get to vote, you need to be more of a marketer, right? Whereas in a scientific conference, you need to be more of a researcher and sneak in some marketing elements along the way. Yeah, that's very cool. Is it all right that we got now a little bit more technical? Because, as a guest in this podcast, you're regarded as a web audio expert, if you agree on it or not. And so my first question to you is, in this area, do you prefer TypeScript or JavaScript?
Definitely TypeScript these days. But I do remember that when I first heard about it, I thought, yeah, what's that? I don't need it. There were other things before, like CoffeeScript, for example, and I thought TypeScript is just another iteration of that. And yeah, but these days I can't really do it. Well, I think I can, but I don't want to do anything without it anymore.
Okay, that's a good tip. Also, where to start in this world.
But I think, like, the things we talk about, web audio and other related APIs, that's actually a weakness of TypeScript, I would say, because it has built-in types for what it thinks the browser provides. Like, TypeScript is only living on top of JavaScript, and it can't really enforce the types at runtime. It can only tell you at compile time, and at runtime, it's still the good old JavaScript madness that can happen. That anything can happen any time. And TypeScript has, like, I don't know where they got their data from. I think they just take the IDL from the specs and then compute the type definitions for the browser APIs. But this is only a theoretic version of it, and it doesn't match with any browser because they all have these tiny little subtle differences. And then, yeah, I'm not objective on this because I have a few projects which do, like, runtime checks and then only provide the types that are actually available at runtime. But I definitely would recommend doing this for anything that is fairly new, because it's of course no problem if you do this with let me think of something which is like event listeners, like adding an event listener to a DOM node or not. That's probably in all of the browsers right now. But if you do something with the media session API, for example, then it's not really good to rely on the TypeScript types for that.
Okay, so you already touched on another question that I wanted to ask. So is this the biggest problem, the biggest challenge when using a different browser in web audio programs? So they all have their little quirks, and it's hard to write code that runs everywhere in the same way?
Yeah, it's definitely. Well, I would not really call this a problem, because I think it's a good thing that we have different browsers and that they all implement the same spec, because that's frustrating, of course. And there's one particular browser which is famous for being very slow at implementing APIs, but it sometimes also helps. Like when you have a browser which you use during development, then this is kind of the truth that you are following. And then when you test this in a different browser, you naturally think, if something goes wrong, you naturally think, shit, that must be that browser. But sometimes, well, at least that happens for me, that I then realize, oh no, this is me, because I just assumed that this somehow inconsistent behavior in that one browser is okay to rely on, but that was not really meant to be relied on. And then you find things in your code which you can improve on.
Okay, so maybe looking at the bigger picture now, if you were to explain to someone listening to this podcast who is not involved in web development at all, then how would you explain what is the web audio API?
That's actually tricky. Well, I think the naming is very confusing, because the web audio sounds very universal, and it's only a part of the bigger picture. Like the web audio API only deals with sound processing. Like getting inputs is not part of the web audio API. Selecting outputs is not part of the web audio API. There are a lot of things which are not part of it. Like it's I also answer questions on StackOverflow whenever I have time for it, and then a very common pattern is that people ask questions in the web audio API with the web audio API tag, which technically don't have anything to do with it. But yeah, I think that's I'm not sure if that's a problem, but the name is actually, it's a very good name, I would say. It's too good, because it sounds as if the API would do everything that has to do with audio.
Okay, so then it is a set of functions and objects that deal with audio processing then in the browsers, that all the browsers should ideally implement in the same way.
Mm-hmm. I think one analogy that's often used is that it's a bit like a modular synthesizer. It has all these little blocks, like a filter that you can use, and other nodes for playing something, other nodes for analyzing it, and other nodes for mixing it. And I'm not. I think I don't have a good explanation for it.
Okay, so it's something that everyone just needs to experience on their own.
Well, I'm not sure if that's true, but it's true that Chris Rogers first came up with the concept, and he I think was before tasked to build the native APIs on macOS. So I think it's fairly similar, but I can't say this for sure, because we don't really work with the native APIs.
Okay. And when it comes to these differences in the implementation of audio-related APIs in the browsers, then how do you personally handle it?
I test and test whenever possible. Like when like Chrome and Firefox and Edge as well, of course, because it's Chrome now to Chromium. They have releases or the preview releases of the upcoming versions. So you can test against the current version, but you can also test against the beta version, which is probably coming in 4 weeks, and then against another version, which is coming in 8 weeks. And if you run all your tests constantly against all these different versions, then you should, in theory at least, be able to detect bugs before they arrive in the stable version. And that's a way to give early feedback to the browser vendors, because they also don't want to break things. And generally, if you get a chance to report bugs while they are still implementing it, then there's a good chance they're fixing it right away, because there's someone working on it anyway. So yeah, that's actually a good way to prevent this. But it's a bit different for Safari, because they also have a technology preview version, but it's not, there's no clear path which of these features land in the stable Safari and when. Like they might land in a different version. You can experiment with it, but you cannot really rely on it. So that's a tricky thing.
Okay, and when you say running tests, do you mean automated tests or manual tests?
Yeah.
Okay.
No automated ones. Yeah.
Nice. And then during the Audio Developers Conference 2022, I wanted to ask another question. The question was, I know that you also have something on your repository that is called standardized audio context. Is that correct? So
that's.
So could you tell us a little bit about what was the idea for it and how it works?
The final goal of the library is to delete it. So it's dealing with browser inconsistencies, and also it's very frustrating. not frustrating. It's sad when you have to delete code that you put so much work into developing, and then it's obsolete. But I try to delete as much code as possible. Like it's also heavily based on this idea that everything needs to be tested. I think it has about 10,000 tests that it runs, and it's whenever there's some bug in some browser which needs to get fixed, I add a test for it, which is supposed to fail when this when the bug gets fixed in the browser. So I can monitor when it gets fixed, and then I usually wait about at least 2 releases, and then I remove the code so that it's that it doesn't pile up indefinitely.
Nice.
So, and hopefully at some point it's just exposing the native audio context without any patches to it. But yeah, it's not there yet.
Nice. That's actually a beautiful work, and I think that browser manufacturers should bless you for it. Because also it tells them where the problems lie, right?
Yeah, well, they have their own project for this, like it's called Web Platform Tests, and it's also a set of tests which they run across every browser to check if they are compatible or not. And a lot of these tests are duplicated in my code base, because these projects started independently. And yeah, it would be super nice if someone could take the effort to merge the 2 test suites, but yeah, no one did so far. And it's obviously a tedious task to do. So I'm not sure if anyone will ever do it.
Yeah, I get it. Alden, moving on to other area of your interest. So at Audio Developers Conference 2022, you presented on audio synchronization on the web. Is this your current area of focus right now?
Yeah, it actually is. Yeah. By coincidence, I got a few client projects which deal with this, and I also had a long-standing personal project working on this. So yeah, this is what I spend most of my time with these days.
And I know that there is a talk available on YouTube that we will link to, but maybe would you like to summarize the challenges of this area in a few sentences?
I would say it's similar to anything else in the browser, that you can get it working very quickly, like the Pareto principle. You get to something working very quickly, but if you want to do it really, really well, then it takes a lot of time to tweak it. Like I have a library which uses WebRTC data channels to send sync message from one peer to the other, and you can do you can set up a data channel in seconds. There are 100 different tutorials on it on YouTube, I guess. But then you can tweak it so that the semantics of the data channel become UDP-like, that there's no head of line blocking. But there might be head of line blocking if you send other messages on the same connection at the same time, but you can also wait for them. And so there are a lot of things which you can tweak to make it better. But yeah, it's always the question on how much time you want to put into it.
And do you need to test it? You actually set up multiple computers to test it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's very tricky to test this right, because how do you, if you have two independent computers and you want to test how synchronized they are, then how do you know if they are two independent ones? You need a third one which is connected to both of them to tell you if they are in sync. But again, I think this is only something which you can get very far, but then at some point you hit a dead end.
Okay, so to wrap up the topic of Audio Developers Conference 2022, could you summarize your general impression on the conference from the perspective of an web audio programmer?
That was my second ADC in person, I think, and it was great as the first one. I slowly remember the faces that I meet there. So it's like meeting familiar people again. And yeah, of course, I like being at a conference talking about audio for 3 days. That's great. But I think web audio or audio on the web is slowly but steadily becoming a mainstream topic. It used to be like, yeah, that's interesting, but yeah, that's not nothing for serious projects. And I think that's slowly changing. But yeah, I can imagine it's still a long way to go until this is finally something. Well, I'm not sure if this should be something that everyone does. So maybe it's becoming, it stays a certain area and doesn't really become mainstream. I don't know. What were your impressions?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So I see there's a lot happening, and especially an important point about web audio is that it is written with JavaScript, and a lot of people feel quite good with JavaScript, while they really hate C++, C, and related languages. So I think maybe at one point we'll get into some beautiful merge of JavaScript being able to process audio in a more C++ way of native compiled program, and this will somehow merge with the web audio stuff as well. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's a chance to do these things with WebAssembly, but yeah, maybe I did something wrong. But whenever I used it, it was like a clear border between the things. Like there was the WebAssembly C++ part, and then there was the JavaScript, which then was mostly just glue code. And I haven't seen any good way yet to merge the two, so that you can actually merge things and take things from both worlds. It's either one or the other right now, but maybe that's coming. I don't know.
Yeah, but definitely.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, but I say that definitely this topic is kind of hot right now, and it's very interesting to explore. Also, all the applications that I saw on the internet were really amazing, up to a full-fledged DAW in the browser, which I guess is already out there in some form of or another.
Yeah, it is. But what I'm curious about is like, what will people build, which hasn't been possible before? Like, I think everything is possible in every language. Like, it depends on the effort that you are willing to put into it. But there are a lot of things on the web which are essentially free, like sharing a link with someone is essentially free instead of sending a binary and hoping that it will execute on the other device. So yeah, I'm curious what will come out of it when once people are done with replicating the status quo. I'm curious what will be next. But also, like that's what I just wanted to say, that at the ADC there are audio topics in general, and they usually apply, even if it's not really meant for the environment. Like there were talks on real-time programming, how to make this thread safe, and yeah, the same problems exist if you mix WebAssembly with JavaScript and have different web workers and then an audio workload and all that communicating with a shared array buffer. It's basically the same in the end. So that's also nice to hear these kind of talks.
Great. So it's already a little bit or a lot of overlap. And then will you be present at the Audio Developers Conference 2023?
I don't know yet. Is the call for papers actually already open? I don't know.
Okay. So actually, it's already closed.
Okay. So then the answer is no.
Okay, then I'm sorry, but maybe you'll like to drop by, just for fun.
Yeah, sure. That's actually the best part. That's the reason why I go to conferences, is to talk with other people about similar things. Like, because I'm mostly working remote, so this is a chance for me to talk to other people. But the talk is always the stressful part of it, and the other one is the part which I enjoy. So going to a conference without giving a talk is actually also very much worth it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I'm like, for me, it's the same in the way that in my area there are no audio related meetups. Even like a C++ meetup is like an hour drive away, I think, the nearest one. So I also enjoy going to such conferences to be able to talk to people about similar problems that you're experiencing, but also this podcast is another chance for me to talk about cool stuff. So now let's focus maybe on the learning aspect of web audio programming. So let's say that someone wanted to do audio in the browser, so wanted to code some piece of audio software in the browser. And from your perspective, what are the go-to technologies today? So which languages, which libraries, which frameworks would you recommend? And if that makes things easy for you, let's assume that I would like to code a simple oscillator, so a kind of a synthesizer, and then followed by a filter, and I want it to run in the browser just to output sound.
If that's all you want to do, then I would like go to MDN, the general documentation of the web, and search for the oscillator node and the backward filter node, and then chain these two, and then you're basically done. But it's tricky for me, since I'm probably the wrong person to answer this. Like, it would be nice to have someone who just started with it and get their impression. But there's a very very old project from Matt called Web Audio School. I think it's still up and running, which is giving you a few little tasks, and then you have to fill in the blanks, and then you can run the code, and either it works or it doesn't. So that's actually nice. And the Chrome team has a lot of web audio examples, I think is the repository called, where they have simple examples for the web audio API. Similarly, Paul from Firefox has a blog where he publishes articles on the web audio API. Ruth, actually from Mozilla, has MDN tutorials for the web audio API, like not the usual MDN pages which describe an interface or a function. Like there are also pages which are like tutorials, product tutorials, and what else? And then of course there's the web audio Slack channel and StackOverflow, where you can go to and ask questions.
Okay, thanks a lot. I hope that everyone noted it down, and if not, then I will also link to these resources.
I also got like Tone.js is a very, very popular library, and it's very big and probably overwhelming to start with, but you will find a lot of resources on it because it's used by a lot of people. So yeah, that's maybe also a good idea to look at that.
Okay, and then my question is, because that's something that interests me, what is the overlap between Tone.js and Web Audio API?
Actually, a lot. Like the basic concepts are very similar. That you have nodes which you can chain together, and Tone.js also has things which are basically the native things, but it has a lot of stuff on top of it. Like it's I'm not sure I can think of a good analogy for that, but it's like if you think of the Web Audio API as a modular synthesizer, then Tone.js uses this modular synthesizer to plug together a few of the modules to produce higher level modules for you. So yeah, I can't think of a good example for now, but yeah, that's basically the idea behind it, I think.
Okay, nice.
Like it was developed by Yotam, so he has to answer this question ultimately, but I think that was the idea.
Okay, nice. So I also know where to start with. So TypeScript and Tone.js, and we're good to go. Yeah. Now, maybe towards the end, I wanted to ask you, how do you go about your open source contributions? Because I know that you had a lot of them. And for someone who's interested in this, where do your ideas come from? How do you find projects to contribute to, and in which areas do you contribute in?
I think my contributions are actually very, very selfish. Like when I run into a bug with an open source project, I know that they accept PRs, I usually try to fix it, and that's how I make contributions. But it's not that I browse the issues and try to find something that I can work on. It's always something that I want to get fixed now, and then I do it. And that's also, I think, the main motivation for my own projects when I work on something which I need, and then I put it out because I think other people might need it too. And also you can even think of that as a very selfish thing, because when you put something out, you get actually, well, sometimes you get like simple questions, but oftentimes you also get detailed bug reports from people, and they tell you about bugs that you had no idea that you had in your software. So it's actually quite rewarding then in the end.
Okay, that's great that you also had this that you experienced this nice side of the internet then.
Yeah, there's obviously it's not only nice, as you can imagine. But as soon as you put something out in the wild, this will happen. That crazy people will find you, but not only crazy people.
Yeah, let's stick to it. And then maybe if you could have a wish about the web audio programming environment, what would it be? What would you wish for the web audio programming?
Like in general, like the broader picture?
Yeah, maybe what is the broader picture? So what we would wish that would be technologically possible.
Yeah, I think in general, like a thing when you work on the web that is very frustrating is that it takes such a long time for things to finally become usable. Like there's a fairly new thing in the Web Audio API which allows you to set the output device. Traditionally, you only, when you create an audio context, it will always go to the default audio output on your system. There was a hacky way to do to route to another audio device in Chrome, but it wasn't really meant to be used like that, and it also had a lot of drawbacks. But it was like I can't remember that anyone ever was against adding this properly to the Web Audio API. Like there were no objections to it, but still someone had to write the spec text for it. Someone had to review it. Someone had to, proofread it. Then someone had to implement it. Then, it's still not there. Like I think Firefox released it, is releasing it or released it a few weeks ago, and Safari doesn't have it. Chrome has it, but in a quirky way. And it's taking years, but even though like it's not a controversial thing, like now you can imagine how long it will take if you have something controversial. Like it takes a multitude longer. But if I could wish for something, I would love to speed this up.
Yeah, I think the C++ developers feel you with their, not just the standard releases, but then also waiting for the compilers to follow up with, what's been voted into the standard.
Yeah, I actually think that going back to your previous question, like I think that's something that the ADC is also very good for, because in the web audio or in the web bubble, there's always this notion of, the web sucks. Native programming must be much better. And then if you actually go out and talk to other developers, then you realize it's the same problems everywhere. Like it's not that it's magically resolved and you don't have to deal with it anymore when you go to native world. Like I can imagine that it's completely a nightmare to develop Android apps for 10 different Android versions, for example.
It sometimes is. It sometimes is because you get done, a bug report, which happens on every Android device that has a certain Android version. And in your company, you have 50 test phones and emulators, but not this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I can imagine,
yeah, at one point we actually needed to order a specific Android device to see what the problem was, and then do git bisect and find the problem and solve it actually. So, but talk to me about an expensive way to solve a bug.
Yeah, that's also why I don't want to sound too negative about the web environment. Like it's, I think it's the same everywhere. You cannot really hide from these kind of problems.
Yeah, but then when you overcome them, it gives you a lot of satisfaction and self-confidence, right?
Until you get to know about the next one.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, Chris, thanks a lot. It was a great conversation. Thank you very much. And the last question regarding potential fans and potential clients. So if someone wanted to contact you, where do you recommend they go?
You can just go to my website and send me an email if you want to contact me. I usually take pride in answer every email I get. If you manage to address me by name and you add your name too, then I usually reply. But at some point I had to pick a company name, and my company is called Media Codings. So my website is media-codings.com.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Thanks again for this interview,
and
I hope to meet you then soon in person.
Yeah, we will surely do, because you're here, once in a while.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, everyone. That was Christoph Guttandin, a web audio developer from Berlin. An awesome guy. Thanks a lot, Chris, for this interview. If you, dear listener, would like to read up on the tools and resources that Chris mentioned during this podcast episode, then please head over to episode notes at thewolfsound.com/talk014. Once again, thewolfsound.com/talk014. And if you enjoyed this episode, I'd be really happy if you click the thumbs up button on YouTube, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and please also consider giving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you. Thanks a lot for it. And thank you for all the positive feedback that I got after these podcast episodes. So remember about your free resource, the audio plugin developer checklist at thewolfsound.com/checklist, your personal roadmap of how to become an audio developer. And I'd like to thank you for watching and listening. See you in the next one. Take care.